Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. Should I ask, does anybody know that, or should I confess now that I'm a bit of a substitute? I'm a pinch hitter here. Should I not say? Anyway, somebody way more important with a far bigger title than me was supposed to, no, I'm just kidding. Um, so there was somebody there's a lot of us that can talk about cultural tourism. And I feel very lucky to be here. I'm actually from Wisconsin, so I feel very back at home here in the Midwest and in Michigan, and I'm really totally impressed with how many people are here today. We have an annual luncheon at in our organization, and we have an annual luncheon that's big. We have an annual marketing meeting, and it's about the same amount of people. I mean, this is a really big group of people, and you're rallying, and you're coming around arts and culture, and you're talking about it in the context of it being a business, of it being a creative industry, and it's very exciting to see. So I'm really happy and very honored to be here, and thank you so much, Deb. So, we're good? So, before I start, though, I just wanted to, can okay, hang on, one moment, and I'm like see, Alice, you should have, you were the first one, and I should have learned by now, so I'm using this. Am I pointing anywhere? Okay, just before I start, when I saw that Mike and Chris were here and talking, I'm saying performing, and talking at lunch, I was like, really, Deb? After lunch? Everybody's gonna be like tired, and they'll be so funny, and then I'm gonna get up and start talking about economic impacts for the arts. But I did wanna just support that I love Funny or Die. I've been a fan, and this was me in my office in 2012. I went as between two ferns, and I made people come into my office all day long and just sit there, and I would interview them, and sometimes I would just stare at them awkwardly for long periods of time, and they'd be like, are you gonna ask me anything? And I'm like, and then they would leave, and then pretty soon by the end of the day, everybody was like kind of standing in line before the end of the day because they all wanted to be interviewed between two ferns. So just a little shout out for my fandom there. Okay, in the big picture of arts and culture, in the big picture of tourism, let's start there. There's an organization a lot of you might know. There's Brand USA, and that's a newly formed organization about 4 years ago or so. And it's kind of our national organization that promotes the United States as a destination. England has one, India has one, China has, not China, but all these big, huge countries have these organizations, and the United States didn't have one. We had an organization that was U.S. Travel, and they did a lot of lobbying, but they weren't around the planet promoting the United States as a destination. And in San Francisco, I can tell you, we must be a hotbed or a target audience for India, because everywhere our buses say Incredible India, and the transit says Incredible India, and there's big billboards, and we don't have that going on in any other parts of the country. So in this industry of tourism, which is often the #1 industry for a city or a state, it is the #1 industry in San Francisco. This is important business, and if there's trade shows that happen all over the planet, and if we're not at that trade show promoting our destination, it's not getting promoted, and so we need to be there at that table to be promoting us, and that's what the USA logo is. That's Brand USA. They're out of DC. As you know, you have Michigan does the same thing. Every state has a visitor office, and ours is Visit California. So as an agency, we work very closely with Visit California because we don't want to be promoting San Francisco to a destination that we don't have any airlift or we don't have people coming and visiting from. So we look to the state of California to tell us who's coming into the state, and then from there we look at what their interests are and we figure out how to get them to San Francisco. Some of this is very elementary to us. Some of it, I thought I'd just sort of throw a big picture blanket over this whole process. So our organization is the Convention and Visitor Bureau. We renamed ourselves 4 years ago, to San Francisco Travel, and that was just a part of a brand initiative. We wanted to start being regarded as sort of a leisure destination. We identified that having the word convention and visitor and the word bureau wasn't resonating very well. And so we went through this brand process, and we have about 1,500 members of all different kinds of sectors. It could be caterers, it could be attractions like Alcatraz, and it's a lot of museums. And then our organization also works, we're a membership-based organization, but we also work with lots of things. So for example, we have a building called Coit Tower. It doesn't have an owner, it's run by Park and Rec, people want to go visit it, but there's not a way, like we can't say, hey, Coit Tower, can you become a member? You need to be on our membership list. So if people are looking for iconic architecture, it wouldn't turn up. And I just point that out because all of us have a lot of assets, and it might be something that's just painted on a wall down in an alley, and you have to figure out how to pull all those cultural assets together in one place so that people know what it is if they're going to a visitor bureau website to decide where they're going to travel or what they're going to do when they travel. So I'm going to now I've dialed it in specifically to arts and culture marketing. San Francisco in 1989 had a very important visionary, Carrie Schulman. She works for Grants for the Arts. It's a local organization that uses hotel tax to fund arts initiatives that are in the city. And she said, you know what, visitors are coming to San Francisco. It's a very popular destination, and there's a lot of art here. We should market the visitors. And so in 1989, she created a grant, gave the grant to a small nonprofit, and said, you promote the arts to the visitors that are coming to San Francisco. And that nonprofit was a well-intended organization of like 2 people, but it didn't necessarily have the channels to work to access all the convention attendees that were coming and so forth. So suffice to say, 2 years later, that relationship sort of dissolved. They took the grant and put it in the Convention and Visitor Bureau. So that would mean in 1991, we had the first city in the nation that actually had an arts and culture director at the table, so that all of our different departments, whether it was the tourism department promoting international tourism or our domestic groups and our convention department, actually incorporated arts and culture throughout the different channels of our business. So that's what I'm going to walk through now. The main thing we have to sort of do in San Francisco is we do have a lot of great things that we can offer, and we have a lot of great things that people can see and do, and we have to get really focused on it because we have to really treat it like a business. If I was Target, for example, I wouldn't say, oh, I'm not really sure, I might want to sell toothpaste, that might be a focus, maybe I'll put it, out in the front aisle, or maybe we'll do shirts, or maybe we'll do more housewares. You've got people analyzing who's in the market, who's shopping there, what it is they want, and that's what they're putting forth. They don't have the ability to buy a whole lot of, they're not selling refrigerators, they're selling small appliances. They've identified their market, they've identified their brand and their audience, so that's what we needed to do. So essentially, I'm realizing that this is I guess I can read it there. Okay. So the main thing now is, that's been trending for a long time, is that we're talking about arts and its economic impact. So it's no longer enough to say, oh, but it's really great, it's really well intended, and we should really have more art, and it makes everybody feel good, except what Deb said, and that is that it's got a huge economic impact. So we look very closely at what that is, and we're actually measuring it now year over year. We also want to look at what we're going to do very strategically, and I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of that. And so this whole presentation is walking through that, how we actually position ourselves as San Francisco, who our audience is, what our messaging is. And then we did something that got tremendous success, and I'm going to sort of run through this. We'll save questions till after, so you can ask me anything or pull aside, because I want to spend a little more time on the success story. And one thing I also want to point out is there's something that we say in San Francisco quite a lot, and that's that we punch above our weight. And so we're less than 1 million people. It's 7 miles by 7 miles, and it's 22 neighborhoods. So it's not like we have, which you can imagine, so it's not unlike what we're looking at in the room today. All those neighborhoods want to promote themselves in a way that's different from the neighborhood that's right next to them. And you've got the Haight-Ashbury, and it's next to Golden Gate Park, and Haight-Ashbury is going out, and they're having messages, and they're talking about the way they want to do things. But when the visitor crosses the street, they don't know that's Haight-Ashbury and that's Golden Gate Park. But Haight-Ashbury made a map, and it's different from the map at Golden Gate Park, and it doesn't line up because they're different scales, and they have the different bus routes on it. So it's a constant challenge for any destination to sort of link it all together. And I just make that point because San Francisco it's always on the top, 5 destinations in the United States to visit. It's a known iconic destination. We have a huge amount of people that visit and repeat. But I don't want you to think this isn't necessarily something that's going to apply to us. It's the exact same thing. It's like if you took San Francisco and stretched it out all over the state of Michigan, same issues, same kind of things that we all have to work on. And I have this in good accord because I have 7 counterparts around the country that are also arts and culture directors for a destination marketing organization. We all have this conversation all the time. So in terms of economic impact, we have some actual numbers. We did a study in 2010, which we're repeating. San Francisco has about $9 billion that we record in as our economic impact. So that's going to be the hotels and the transportation and dining and arts and culture and so forth. We took the study a little bit further and we identified, this was not a small study. This was 10 cities of the top tier cities that visit San Francisco, and we solicited 400 people in each of those cities and asked them a series of questions. And out of that, so that's 4,000 some people, out of that we asked them questions and we identified that of the pot of people that are coming to, pot of people, do you see how I just did that? San Francisco, pot, not so funny, you guys gotta wake up. It's Mendocino, but we have it too. So anyway, we identified that of that $9 billion, 1.7 of it was coming directly to the arts, and it was generated as a result of the arts. That's 20%, and that's more, as Sarah had pointed out, than all of the other attractions put together in terms of like sporting events and so forth. And this was a huge number, and this woke everybody up. And I'll tell you what, I got this number, and I wrote it out as a soundbite. I write about 5 or 6 sound bites a year, and I go around and I give it to the mayor, and I give it to all the supervisors, and I give it to the people that work for all the business improvement districts, and I'm like, this is your first or second soundbite. And it's gonna be their 10th, but at least I tell them it's gonna be your first or second. And by God, if the mayor didn't start putting this in all of his speeches. So now I found out like who writes all the speeches for all these people, and I'm just walking around going, this is the most important data you've got, it's arts and culture. So I'm trying to get people to just talk about it. And that's another trick to use in terms of unifying. So if you worked together and you identified what your different numbers are and everything, and then just have these aligned sound bites that you're being able to provide everybody, and it makes you unified as an industry. I'm pointing at this like it's going to help. There we go. What have we got here? Oh, so strategies. Going into the strategy part of it, like we could do a number of different things, and we have a lot of interested parties, and we have constituents that have lots of money. So for example, our 4 top institutions, so the ballet, the symphony, the opera, and American Conservatory Theater together have a $275 million budget if you combine all their budgets together, and that's a lot. And so I'm often saying we have to choose from our favorite family members, and that's what we have to do. We have a lot of great things, but sometimes you have to promote a certain message to one audience and a certain message to another audience, and so it's very difficult. We play a very political role in terms of it's a lot of trust that I build with the community. I'm like, I'm not going to talk about you in this capacity, or I'm not bringing journalists to your venue in this capacity, but I'm going to bring them in this capacity. So we try to make the right fit. So we're very focused on what it is that we're trying to do. The main focus is we're trying to drive people. We just want to get more people to come to San Francisco. And then lastly, just to sort of keep it very simple, we want to, because it's really hard to measure what we do, so we really want to just maintain San Francisco's awareness as an arts and culture destination. Because, face it, when the Giants win, I sometimes say when the Giants win the Super Bowl, just as a joke, so because people think I don't know anything about sports, and I really don't, but it's more about like, it's more about talking about the arts in the spirit of, this is a very important economic revenue generator for us, and so for having our messages out and having the 36 hours in the New York Times, thank you very much, we need to have the stories, you know, often be about arts and culture, because it can easily be about tech. We're so overtaken by our tech industry right now, and the legalization of marijuana and all these other stories that you have to, we're in there fighting with our elbows just to try to get the story of arts and culture. Not that it's not important, it's just I'm sharing that as a way to demonstrate that it's not always easy for us to make sure that that story stays top of mind. Okay, so into positioning, this is what we're going to kind of move through quickly. We stay very focused on who we're trying to reach. I really should have made this point size bigger. We really want to, we're going to fish where the fish are. So we're going to find people that we know cultural experiences are already resonating with them. And the other thing, the 3 next, and key cultural influencers, that's the last thing on there. Obviously now with social media being as big as it is, we want to make sure that people are using Instagram and Facebook and all of our social media platforms in a way to push out our messaging. But I don't want you to miss or not think highly of meeting planners and media and journalists. This is very important. Sometimes we aren't the most well-funded department within our organizations, and that would be good if we were better funded, but you can often do a lot with little funding, and so these are two ways that we do that. There's meeting planners that come to San Francisco. We're a big convention town, and so we've got a whole platform that we're going to be launching in 2016, and it's called Meet Culture. So we have all of these venues. Our Moscone Center is in the middle of 10 cultural institutions, and we've just looked at it like, oh, isn't this great? We have 10 cultural institutions that are right near the Moscone Center. But in 2016, our visitor guide and our travel planner guide is going to have a little walking path to show that everything is just like one block from Moscone, and we're doing a video that shows that a sort of time lapse of somebody walking out of Moscone and walking to all of these destinations that are really close. And when they get there, it slows down and it pops up and it shows how many square footage is in that area. The meeting planner is a really important audience to be looking at, and you can't forget about that. What do we want them to believe? This is where I was talking before a little bit is with the target analogy. You have to stay really focused because there's so many different stories, and while all the stories are really good and valuable, you really do have to kind of put things in very clean and tidy buckets and then put that messaging out. And so with our positioning in San Francisco, we've just, one of the things that I think we're trying to leverage more is that we do have this old, classically known city for our arts and our culture, like the ballet, the opera, and the symphony. We're outside of New York. We were the only city for many, many, many decades to have a city proper ballet, opera, and symphony. And so we have a good old, historical assortment of classic venues and classic things to do that are 100 years old, but we also have this this gritty Burning Man-esque kind of crowd that wants to go to young, hip, off the beaten path things. And so how do you balance the two? And so this is the four buckets that I sort of stay focused on: the big classics, and then that bespoke avant-garde that you kind of would think of as the makers, and iconic running along festivals. We often don't think of a film festival or of our Pride Parade necessarily in the same way that we think of like a museum or a ballet, but we actually are starting to do a very specific event analysis. We're running all of our events through this system that says, like, does it happen over a holiday weekend? Because that means we probably have hotel rooms. Is it iconic? Is it old? When is it going to be 20? When is it going to be 25? When is it going to be 50? So that we can really develop very clean, tidy, simple messaging around all of our events. So that's become a very important strategy for us. The other thing now, again, with the advent of the internet, we have like 600 people follow us or like us on Facebook. That's a lot, and it's also a double-edged sword. I told somebody earlier, we stopped going after quantity last year because it was too much. So we're really just going after the engagement now and trying to get our engagement numbers up higher. Oh, they're very, very engaged. But that audience is also very local. So for a while, our eye, I think, kind of went off the ball a little bit, and we stayed so focused on that audience. We were realizing the audience is very local, and we're just following it so closely. And as a visitor bureau, you kind of have to step back, because when you're talking to a tour operator in India, they want to know what's going to be on display in museums in a year and a half from now, and that's just not announced yet. And then you're talking to somebody at the Visitor Information Center, and they want to know what they can go to tomorrow. So we're starting to figure out our channels and how to use our channels for our different audiences. The other thing that we really want to stay focused on is that we are kind of ever evolving. I think for a long time, a lot of us as cities, and I was in Pasadena before I was in San Francisco, and we did this kind of only in San Francisco, only in Pasadena. When I got to San Francisco, they said, oh, our title's only in San Francisco, and they were very proud of it. And I was like, that's what ours was like, we're all only in. But it does really go to being able to tell the stories over and over again in a new and fresh way. So how do you tell the San Francisco International Film Festival story over and over again each year, and how do you make that fresh, and how do you make the story interesting? So we really want to focus on the fact that it also helps us too with our tech, because the tech is really, I mean, we really do struggle in a way with San Francisco being known as a visitor destination for something other than tech, because you can't go to tech. Now, Twitter now has their offices on Market Street. It's a beautiful building, but you can't walk in and go, oh, it's Twitter, I'm here at Twitter. I mean, you just see the building and it's an office building, but people are making pilgrimages to come to San Francisco because they think they're going to be able to, like, go meet Mark Zuckerberg, which, by the way, moved into my neighborhood. So do you think the rents? I can't even. That could be a whole other topic. Okay. So perceptions we want to strengthen. I'm taking too long on these slides, so I'm just going to not read all of these. But basically, we want to make sure that that we're seen that we really are doing a good job with making sure the diversity of our destinations and our neighborhoods are put out there. And we also want to look at the long established museums and activities that are going on. The great thing about what you have to offer, whether you're an attraction or whether you're a city promoting an attraction or whether you're funding something, is that the arts are always changing. And so even though museums have permanent collections, that's good because people want to go revisit their favorite things in their permanent collections. But because it's always changing, it allows the Convention and Visitor Bureau to actually keep that message going, because you always need a fresh message in a Convention and Visitor Bureau. Like our visitor guide, it's kind of the same visitor guide every year. We just change the pictures and tweak it a little bit. But we're never going to put out a visitor guide that doesn't have the bridge, doesn't have the curvy Lombard Street, doesn't have the sea lions. I mean, we have to have all of those greatest hits. You just have to kind of tell the story in a fresh way. Speaking of the International Film Festival, so the audiences that we target, through research, we, well, I haven't gotten to research yet, earned media. Going back to that other slide where I talked about how the journalists are very important and so are the meeting planners, this kind of sums it up a little bit. We know that visitors are motivated by cultural experiences, and so we look at very specific audiences that we know have a propensity to come to San Francisco, and we actually seek out those journalists, and we're all reading their work to try to find journalists that we think might be have some interest in us, and we also are sort of having annual events. We have an annual event in LA and an annual event in New York where we actually meet with journalists to promote our stories. Tour operators are our next key audience. So I work with our tourism division, and when they're out at trade shows, and we have 13 offices around the planet, when they're in trade shows in those offices, they're talking about not only San Francisco as a destination with a bridge and Lombard Street, but also what the different arts and culture attractions have. So these are the cities that we are targeting. I'm going to really go through this quickly. Meeting planners, for every 60 meeting planners, they're responsible for 1 million room nights, so that's a really important audience for us. And let's get to messaging. And then this goes back into the buckets, and this is the refinement of our messaging, so we're not talking about like a little bit of everything all the time. We want to talk about our classic offerings, our makers, our festivals, and then again venues, which you're seeing over and over again, meeting planners and venues. And then we look at these iconic things that are happening, and that sort of, like right now I have my whole calendar kind of paced out from now through the middle of 2016 in terms of what we're going to talk about. Obviously our digital channels are incredibly important to us. And then just lastly, this is the success story I wanted to share. In 2013, we were about to put out a press release. This is really quick, Deb, so don't get nervous. We were about to put out a press release. I'm not even kidding when I tell you, because I kept it, 37 pages long. Who's going to open that press release? Anyway, it was all about tree lightings and menorah lightings, and it was fabulous, and it was well written, and everything was really accurate. But we had just launched the Bay Lights. Has anybody here heard of the Bay Lights? Okay, cool. So it's the largest LED light installation on the planet Earth, and it was in San Francisco, and somehow it didn't make the lighting of the 37-page press release. We flipped the whole story really quickly. We started to tell the story about the Bay Lights, and we did that in 2013, and we did it again in 2014. We called it Illuminate SF. We had a whole effort around it to generate room nights. It was over the holiday. It was over the winter solstice. It was on brand for us because we have a lot of public light art, which I'll show you, and it was just very desirable and fundable. We had light and art installations, we had personal appearances, illuminated walking experiences, we had a bike ride through the city, which was not easy, and everybody had lights all over their bikes, and we created maps. We put everything on a website, Illuminate SF, and that shows you the 16 or 18 different light art installations that people could go visit. 176 million media impressions. Now here's where that's a lot, by the way. If you're not the one who measures your media impressions, we're thrilled with like 2 million. So to get 176 million media impressions, I kept going to meeting after meeting, like, oh, we're doing this Illuminate SF thing. It's really cool. And everybody's like, that's so cute. She's the art girl. We're going to do the art. This happened. I spent $10,000 on this campaign, It was pretty amazing. Oh, this is all getting filmed, isn't it? I can't be too gloaty, can I? So these are just a sample of some of the light art installations. Half of these, I would say, if not more than half, are funded by our 1% for art, like the mayor had been talking about before. These are in SFO. And this is, I think, my last slide. It was an event that we did. You can see the bay lights in the background. It's actually the Oakland Bridge with the 25,000 LED lights, and they all form different patterns. And that's a boat. It's the top. You'll know what this is. It's the top of a grain silo covered in 1,500 lights, and it has a number of different light patterns, and it floats around out in McCovey Cove if you've ever played and watched a game against the Giants. And there's another light art installation, and we brought everybody around in a cable car when it was too cold to walk. And we benefited from it. That's all you really need to know about that. And that's it.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Lisa, for that. What did we hear? We heard work together, partnerships, arts and culture, work with tourism, convention and visitors bureaus to bring people into our communities to benefit our merchants, our hotels, our economies. So working together. Okay.